Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 106. My name is NBZ, and in the dead of winter we are right now, as I have been outside constructing a snowman. I haven't thought of a name for him yet. But his face fell off this morning because the rain was happening, and now he's just a faceless snowman, very sadly so. But Bally joins me. I don't know that you have any snow around you in the old Brussels.
We had a lot of snow. This weekend I was in Bruges as well as Brussels, and at the weekend we had snow in Bruges, and then today we had a lot of snow in Brussels. But it's been warm enough today where it all just basically melted straight away, which was
that's a shame.
It's just horrible and slushy. But it was the same in Bruges. It was just ugh.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. It was definitely very thick yesterday. I woke up and I was like, "Oh my god!" It keeps going. The snow was still falling. Like, it was thick and really good. And I went into the garden of my grandparents' house and just made a massive ass snowman.
That's unusual for London as well.
Yeah, it doesn't really happen that often, but it was really cool, and I enjoyed it, and that was a fun time. So I guess you can check my Instagram if you want to see that picture of me with my snowman.
So that gets a very rare plug on this podcast.
Yeah, no, I never plug my Instagram ever. It's not really a thing I use that often. But hey, there you go. Bally, we're here again for the end of the year. It's starting. The Game of the Year train begins, and that's what we're going to be talking about a lot in this show. So how about you tell the folks what this episode's going to be all about?
For our first segment, we are going to be talking about what we have been playing. There's still lots coming out at this very late stage in the year. And then for our second segment, we asked lots of you guys to send in your games of the year that didn't actually come out this year that you've been playing. So we'll go through those for our second segment. And our third segment, we will list off our own top 10 games of the year that didn't actually come out this year, as we always enjoy to call it on the show. It's become a tradition.
It's a great tradition, but also, like, I keep thinking every year, should we just call it like this, the old game of the year list? But then I think, no, we just have to be convoluted. It's, it suits us. We're going to be convoluted.
It's very clear though. It's convoluted but clear,
right?
And you don't want people to be confused by the term old games. I mean, I don't know. I like how specific we are, even if it is long. You
know what? That's the brand. We're being very specific, and that's how we do things. So yeah, it's going to be a big show. It's going to be a lot to do. So why don't we just jump straight into it, Bally? Things have been happening in the world of Nintendo, but you're still chugging along with some nice Mario Odyssey in the background.
Yes, I'm plugging away at Mario Odyssey. I'm up to 460 moons. I'm
getting close to that final challenge there.
Yeah, I'm about 30 hours in, and I'm definitely not going to do the final challenge until it's my final moon.
That's what I did as well. I saved it until the end.
So I'll wait on that.
It almost feels wrong not to do that, right? Because the way that 3D Land and 3D World were built was you had to do everything until you unlock that final challenge. In that tradition, I understand why they allowed it to be open to people early, because collecting 880 moons, to be frank, is obscene, but it definitely, it just emotionally for me, I had to do it that way.
It is obscene, but I am enjoying it, and I have done the very difficult jump rope challenge where you have to get 100 jumps of the skipping rope. So I managed that, and like I said, I'm 100%ing it in terms of moons, not going for purple coins, and I'm up to the Metro Kingdom so far with New Donk City. So I'm probably past halfway, which is encouraging, and yeah, I'm loving it. So I'll check in with that. I'd like to beat it before the end of the year, get up to that 880, I think is the top number, although you do have to pay up to 999, I understand. And yeah, so I'll check in with that later. I've also been playing a lot more Rocket League. I'm just absolutely loving Rocket League. So Caroline's mum was staying with us, so I wasn't able to play Switch in the living room or anything, so we would bring the Switch itself up to upstairs and then just try out playing it 2-player with the Joy-Cons, and it's actually very functional. I mean, it doesn't work terribly well, but I mean, when you think about all the buttons you need for Rocket League, it's a Joy-Con on its side. You actually have all the buttons, which is quite cool for a sports game, essentially. So
yeah, it does have the function. I just don't think it works super well, because unless you're putting on the sliders, I can't remember the
we did put on the sliders, yeah, but even then,
yeah. So unless you have those, pressing the shoulder buttons is really difficult. Because I actually did this in the pub with my mum, because we went there because my dad wanted to watch the football, and we sat there and I gave a Joy-Con to my mum. I'm like, okay, I'm going to teach you how to play this video game. It's about cars and football.
This
and
always goes well.
It went very badly. She had no idea what to do. She was getting very annoyed and frustrated that she couldn't move where she wanted to, because I think the thing with the camera in Rocket League, when it's locked on the ball, when you're moving away from it, as we discussed I think last time, it's really difficult to orient yourself with a joystick, even for someone like us, and for someone who has no idea how to play a game in 3 dimensions, that seems like an impossibility.
Exactly.
So that was trouble for her, but it was a little uncomfortable for sure, trying to play to like click in those sticks, because you have to hold down accelerate, and that's like one of the main buttons on the shoulders on the Joy-Con. So yeah,
tough. We tried it with Joy-Cons briefly, then we gave up, and then Caroline would have the 2 Joy-Cons together in the grip, and I'd have the Pro Controller, and it was just a joy to play. Like, on the screen is actually really big and worked and didn't feel overly cramped. And
so even like split screen down the middle worked out.
Right, yeah, it worked really well. And like I said, we went to Bruges and we brought it then as well. We were staying in a hotel and it worked really well there. Again, I didn't bother with the dock or anything. It was just one night. So I was like, let's just bring the Switch by itself. Brought the Pro Controller and it was a really smooth experience, and we had blast playing some more Rocket League. I'm up to almost 20 hours with that game. Like, it's really good.
Fantastic.
And obviously the big stealth release, I guess you could say, was from the Game Awards, was the second pack of the Zelda DLC, the Champion's Ballad. Which I picked up. Well, I guess it was already downloaded. I think because I don't believe my Switch actually went through any downloading process. It just kind of must have been a key or something overnight, because I went.
Well, because you had already bought the DLC pack originally, the expansion pass. So I imagine it just pinged the Wi-Fi and was like, okay, there's an update to be queued, and then it queued the update and downloaded it for you.
Yeah, because I basically didn't notice the download happening. I just went into Zelda and I was there. It just starts, and I was like, wow, that's cool.
Whereas for me, because I never bought the original expansion pass, I had to go into the shop and buy the whole thing, which is unfortunate because I just wanted the second DLC. But hey, I guess I've got master trials and stuff now, which means that like when I jump into this thing, it's going to be a lot more content for me to go through as opposed to just the second pack, which is kind of cool.
So the second pack is essentially on a very basic level. It's 16 shrines, and apparently, although I'm not there yet, a new dungeon, which is just awesome. I'm not going to go into much more detail on those shrines and what they consist of and how you do it, and I don't know anything about the dungeon. I just looked that up online later because I was very curious, because I wasn't really seeing many straight answers everywhere, and I still don't know like the details of that dungeon. So I'm keen to stay spoiler free.
I mean, they did say in the original pitch for this second DLC that it was going to be new story content and a new dungeon, and then they said extra challenges as well, which I guess is being interpreted as new shrines. So they delivered on their promise. My skepticism with this DLC is the dungeons in Breath of the Wild were not the best part of Breath of the Wild, although I enjoyed some of them. And the shrines, there don't seem to be that many. The thing here is it doesn't seem like there's a new landmass, right? It's just exactly, putting stuff in the existing world.
The gaming loop that most people who enjoyed Breath of the Wild would go back to was the loop of discovering new areas, and then especially stuff like Shrine Quest, working out how the world related to unlocking a shrine, and then doing the shrine itself. That whole loop is slightly broken with this DLC, because you're getting the joy of Shrine Quest and stuff, like you're working out how to make these shrines rise up from the ground, and the shrines themselves and the contents of them are really strong. But it definitely is lacking in that sense of discovery. And the second that you realize that there is no new landmass, it's very hard for them to create something that has the same impact as going through the game first time round. So I am disappointed in the sense there wasn't a new landmass, but for what they have done, it's more of the same awesome game that I enjoyed so much earlier this year. And for that, I think it is actually really strong in that sense. It mixes up some mechanics. There's definitely some regurgitated stuff in there. I'm not going to spoil what that is, but it's exciting, and I'm about halfway through. I think I've done 10 of the 16 shrines. So,
and are you kind of like looking these up, or are you able to? Because I imagined with shrines, right? Like you're going to be going across the world to try and find them, or how is it kind of? phased in that way?
So they do. I won't go into too much detail, but it is basically split into the 4 broad races, the areas, based on the 4 original dungeons.
All right, so you have some sense of direction of where you're going.
Yes, and you're basically going to a point, and then you're given a list of clues on how to get to these new shrines. Some of the clues are incredibly obvious, some are more hidden. And I'm glad some of them are more hidden and others a bit more simple. It's a nice mix of pace.
Yeah, those were some of my favorite shrine quests in the game, were the ones where it was more of a riddle and you really had to think about it. And I think my very favorite one, which you never figured out, which I'm not going to spoil here, but like there are moments in that game where I was like, oh shit, and it just clicks in your brain. You're like, oh wow, that's awesome. So,
and I don't mean to disappoint, but I'm worried that these riddles aren't really riddles. They're very, very simplistic in comparison to those proper shrine quest riddles the first time around. I think some of them are weaker, but I think it's still enjoyable. And as I said, the shrines themselves, like the contents of the shrines, is very, very strong. I've been incredibly impressed by some of the mechanics in those, and the combination of combat and puzzles and things like that is working out really well.
Have you found it difficult going back to Zelda now that it's been so many months removed, and it was a pretty difficult game to learn the controls for, right? Like, is it difficult to rewire your brain back into it?
Not really. I think I was back into it in the space of about 5 minutes. I sort of went through my inventory, worked out, right, what do I need here? What do I need here? Yes, I like that. I like this. Let's fight a few guys. Let's warm up. And I was ready. Like, it wasn't too bad. And it's the sort of muscle memory that once you've been playing the good old video games for a while, it's not too difficult to come back.
Fair enough. Yeah, I imagine when I jump back in, I'm going to be like, oh shit, I have so much stuff, because I went into that final battle fully prepared with all these weapons, and like my inventory was stocked full of like incredibly strong healing items. It was ridiculous, and then I ended up using none of them and just using the Master Sword. So you know, it kind of was. I was a bit broken, overpowered by the end of that game.
Well, they do some interesting things that mix up that formula if you're worried about being overpowered, which I won't go into, but I'd highly recommend picking this up. I think if you liked the first run through of this game, this Pack 2 is definitely much more enjoyable, more content, more interesting than Pack 1, and there's some beautiful cutscenes that I would... they're so good, like, really, really great cutscenes, and... yeah, I would love to try and beat this and Mario Odyssey before the end of the year. So yeah, I'd highly recommend picking this up. I'm like I said, I've got a few more shrines to do, and then who knows what this dungeon is going to be like. I'm intrigued, and I'm going to try and wrap that up very shortly.
And then you'll have the motorbike, and you can just ride around Hyrule on that.
The motorbike.
Which is so fucking crazy.
You have to beat the dungeon to get the motorbike. So I think that's going to be most people's mainline experience of this DLC.
Yeah, fair enough. I really am looking forward to just tearing up the dirt around Hyrule Fields. It's
all
so
of these
ridiculous.
People criticizing it for being out of theme. It's like, you need to get off your high horse and get on the motorbike, because like
it's just so cool.
You gotta be a bit zany at times.
You know that there was like concept art for this, right? Because I think one of the ideas when they were bouncing around stuff for Breath of the Wild was Link having a motorbike. And so like this was a thing that had kind of been in their mind, I guess, since the development process started on Breath of the Wild. And I guess they were like, you know what, this is cool, let's just do this. And you know, I can't fault them for it.
Well, exactly. And Link is on like a horse-themed motorbike in the Mario Kart DLC.
You're right, yeah.
It could totally be linked, and that's really cool. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what that's like.
Cool.
Another big game has come out, MBZ.
Yes.
I know that you've sunk quite a bit of time into.
So
why don't you tell us about it?
So Xenoblade Chronicles 2 came out 10 days ago. And my activity log, I'm not sure if it's even updated yet. I call it the activity log.
I'm intrigued to see this update.
It's not even the activity log, because it's Nintendo's terrible.
The friend profile list thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm not sure it's even updated yet, honestly. Oh no, it's still. I
think you're 1 day away, perhaps.
Yes, it still says first played 10 days ago. So yeah, okay. Not quite got it. But the lovely thing about Xenoblade is that it's one of those games where it tells you the exact time that you have played on your save data. And currently I am 73 hours, 9 minutes and 35 seconds into Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which is fucking absurd. I'm not sure how that happened. I think it's probably because the Switch's portability makes it so much easier to play this at literally any time. But I remember playing Xenoblade Chronicles X and doing like 50 hours of that in the first week and thinking, man, I've played this a lot. And I really feel like I don't feel like I've played as much of this as I did of X, and yet I've played significantly more. There's just something about your brain that gets tricked when you're in handheld mode, I think, because time just kind of evaporates. And I was telling you this earlier, Bally, but I think the first time I've really been sold on the portability of the Switch as a travel device was we were going down to London, and it's a 7-hour journey. It's very long, and for this game, the battery seems to last around 3.5 hours. And so I was playing through a story section for a solid 3.5 hours, and I look up, I'm like, oh shit, we're there. Like, time just absolutely disappears when you're playing this thing in a way that the 3DS never kind of managed to. And I don't know if that's to do with the screen size or whatever, but I know you feel the same way about this, Bally. Like, the Switch is just incredible.
I had this frequently with Zelda earlier in the year, and it was like, wow, I didn't feel like I got anything achieved, and I just spent like 3 hours going through that. Maybe did like 2 shrines or something, and it's a really exciting feeling when you're traveling, because like traveling's not fun. Like, no one wants to be traveling all the time, and just having something that makes the time go by is really impressive. I
think it's the combination of like a really deep, engaging, large game with this handheld and with this form factor, because
the pacing is slow. It's like a home console game, you know.
Exactly.
It's not structured like a handheld game. Like, maybe, I don't know, can't think of one. Maybe like a Link Between Worlds is structured in a more fast-paced way.
Yeah, absolutely. But like games like Xenoblade and Zelda are very slow games by nature. Like, there are a lot of absorbing environment and just running around open fields and that kind of thing. So I guess it just naturally fits into it.
Did you see a meme online? It was saying like to come out on Switch in 2017, your like the artwork, the thumbnail on the Switch console, it's got to include a boy looking over like a grassy plain.
Yes,
because I believe it's like the same for.
It was like Cave Story and Kamiko and Zelda and Xenoblade and all these games,
That's hilarious.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, kind of box art of AAA video games fell into this stigma at one point of like being a white dude with his back facing the box. You know, that was a thing for a long time. So I think there are these marketing trends that just happen generally across games. But Zelda was successful, so why not copy its thumbnail or whatever? Makes sense a lot of the time. So Xenoblade 2 then is not a direct sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles, nor is it a direct sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles X. I think people should imagine this game as more of a Final Fantasy, in where you're carrying over elements in terms of enemies and kind of world design and combat.
And then one day they'll all link together.
Well, I hope so.
I heard James Jones talking about this on RFN. And then the finale is that it all links together.
You know what? I just saw a cutscene, which I don't know where it's going, but something is up, and if it ends up being that, I will not actually be surprised by the end of this game.
Wow,
some stuff is happening. But the idea is that, you know, you're in this world which is filled with titans, and these titans are living creatures that live in the cloud sea. And you play as Rex, who is a salvager, and basically his job is he like dives under the ocean, which is made of clouds. Somehow you swim through these clouds. It's very weird. Like, they have this system in the game which is like low tide and high tide, and if you rest in it will change, and depending on like if the clouds are high or if the clouds are low, you can swim out to certain areas, which is cool and unique and novel, but it's weird. I don't understand how the physics of that work, you know, like I guess it's a video game, so it doesn't really matter, but
physics
but it's weird that like you're going through this like cloud ocean, and so, you know, his job is to like go down and collect spare parts and like sell them off and make his money and his living that way, and so this entire world is similar to the original Xenoblade in that it's different because in that game the Titans were ostensibly dead and like had basically been standing still for thousands of years, but people had cropped up and started living on them. In this case, they are still alive and they're moving through the ocean, and that's kind of the idea of it, is that because it's an ocean, everything is kind of constantly in flux, and the continents go from place to place. And so it does have a bit of a disjointed feel to it, right? Because one of my favorite things about the original Xenoblade was being able to stand on Bionis' leg and look up to the Menace in the background and just see it just looming over you, and knowing that thing was in the distance and that it was a possibility that you would eventually end up there. Because all these titans are like miles and miles away from each other in this cloud sea, you never get that viewpoint. You never get the time where you're standing on the edge and seeing another titan off in the distance, just because the game can't render that. Like, it's not able to, because there are just so many of these things and you're constantly going between them. You don't quite get that same impact. And I think generally the impact of, oh my god, look at this world, is slightly lessened as a result of the original Xenoblade and X to some degree. I think mainly the original Xenoblade because, especially in the opening few hours, you're coming across places that are very familiar. Like, there's a place called Gormoti Plains, which is essentially Gower Plains again, and the first time you see Gower Plains is an astonishing sight, but, when you see this one, it's like, okay, I've seen this before, I've kind of been here, I've done this. And so, like, the impact is somewhat lessened in that sense. I think the game is definitely strongest when it's introducing new places to you, unlike anything you've seen before. And that definitely happens a few times throughout the game, where I was just in awe of the stuff that they had created, and just some really crazy looking, amazing architecture. That's what Xenoblade is best at. Like, it's world building and showing you just these unique areas that you just don't see anyplace else in kind of media or games or anything. So when that happens, I think that is incredibly cool, and I've been enjoying that. So the story and kind of the characters, it took me a while to get into them, because this game is very, very anime. And by anime, I mean, like, it leans into a lot of tropes. It feels generally a lot more lighthearted than the previous two entries. And there's less of a sense of crushing danger, because the characters are far more... I just don't believe in them as much, and I like them. Like, there are characters that I've really gotten into and I've enjoyed, but I don't think Rex is as strong a protagonist as Shulk. I don't feel like we're getting as interesting backstory, and sometimes a revelation will come out of nowhere and then it's not really explained at all, and I'm like, well, I kind of want to know what's up with that and what's going on, but the game just kind of brushes over it and then moves on. I'm like, wait a second, we should maybe address what just happened there. And so, like, there are definitely moments where you'll see the bead of sweat behind the character, and like the eyes popping out and being like blank, and the various kind of things that you expect from kind of anime stuff. And yet it's weirdly juxtaposed to like Takahashi's themes of like, religion and war and politics and all this like grander stuff that Xenoblade has always, all the Xeno games have always been about. So it is a slight strange juxtaposition. And then you also have the idea that all these accents are basically cherry-picked from around the UK. There's actually like a continent which is pretty much Australia as well, because they're all have Aussie accents. But you have the starting area is Welsh. You have an area which are, and this is very weird, the imperialists in this game are Scottish.
I heard about this, yeah, and which is not very common. So
that's a very weird thing that you come across. And one of my favorite characters in the game is this kind of female imperial officer called Morag, who
great name,
probably, yeah, and she has very good voice acting, and probably it's so strange because we usually get all these American voice actors, and I think the original Xenoblade was a change of pace because it was this British cast, but it was mainly English, like it was mainly British English, sometimes RP
renounced.
Yeah, there was some, like Rhine was a little bit Cockney. Like, obviously you had the robots who are very Cockney, but it was more kind of London-based accents, whereas here you're going much more around the breadth of the country, because Rex is northern, and Nia, who is like the second main character you have, is like thick Welsh. And let me tell you, when you see this little cat girl who should look like she speaks like a 10-year-old come out with a 40-year-old Welsh woman accent, it throws throws you for a loop, I'll tell you that much.
I guess Game of Thrones has taken off since the first Xenoblade, and they're trying to get on the bandwagon.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case, but it is very strange to hear this very small cat girl come out with this middle-aged woman Welsh accent. And I really like it now. It's grown on me a lot. It took a while, and it was very strange. And I think partially because the lip syncing is pretty poor across the game. It's just not well done at all. And maybe that's because the difficulty of taking over from Japanese. But I have endeared myself to a lot of these characters and their various accents. And it has a unique flavor to it that if I switch to the Japanese, I think I wouldn't be as engaged with the characters, honestly, because in Japanese they just sound how you expect them to, right? Like the traditional anime tropes with like the high pitch and all that stuff going on that you would come to expect. Yeah. But when they change it up and they give that flavor to it, it definitely makes the game a lot more engaging from the character standpoint. So I think I actually like the characters more, despite the fact that the voice acting is kind of cheesy and kind of bad in places. It definitely doesn't like hold up to the original from my perspective. But there's a lovable quality about some of these characters, and I've been enjoying going through the story because of that. And there are places where it's slow, there are places where it really opens up, and there are some big mysteries dangling over you, and you're like, oh man, this is going to go some places. And I think I really figured out playing this game, and I think I've known this for a while, but my favorite kind of narratives are ones where something has happened in the past and you don't know what it is exactly, and they slowly reveal it over time. And that was in the original Xenoblade. That's a big part of the Danganronpa series. That's a huge part of Ace Attorney. Like, all these kind of media that is based on something is happening right now, but there's also a link to something that happened 500 years ago. In this case, it's 500 years. And I love that, because there's always, like, there is a way in which you can peel back the layers and be like, oh, that connects to this and this connects to that, and I'm very much about that. It's why I really loved the TV series Heroes. It was one of the first big series I got into, because it kind of has time travel stuff, but also because it's like, oh, mysteries that dangling about, what happens in the future and what happens in the past. So that stuff is set up pretty well. Some of it lands, a lot of it doesn't, a lot of it, and I feel there's less kind of unique boss battles and kind of enemies, because there's this central conflict between you and this kind of group of renegade blades who are doing their own thing, and you keep coming back between that conflict, and like there's only so many times you can like get defeated by them or beat them or whatever, going back and forth before it kind of becomes a bit rote. And I just don't think they do an amazing job of that. But I generally speaking, I have enjoyed this game enough to where I'm liking going through and just being along for the ride of the story. It's not got me by the balls like the original game did, but I think it's still telling a cool story. And I hope the end of the game is bananas, because that's my favorite part of Xenoblade, is when it just goes crazy. There's a lot.
And you're very near the end, right?
Yeah. So I basically just beat the Chapter 9 boss. So speaking of bosses, I think we should probably talk about the combat in this game, because
is it Bally friendly?
This is by far the best combat has ever been in a Xenoblade game. As much as I love the other two in the series, I never really got my head around how to play those games, Like, I know that you went through the first game only playing as Shulk, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And I think that's broadly because his arts are very understandable because they're directional, right? Like, it's pretty simple to know what's going on. And every character in the original Xenoblade plays very differently. Like, trying to figure out what the hell Melia does it's like learning a new language, basically, because it's just so completely different from what you're doing usually. And this game makes the characters themselves less important because everything is dependent on the blades, right? And so this system is that Rex is a driver and he finds this girl, Pyra, who is his blade. And basically the blades give energy to their drivers, and that's how they use their arts. And so the arts have been a thing forever in the Xenoblade games, where they are basically cooldown timer attacks that will recharge, and then you'll be able to use them again. But in the meantime, you kind of auto-attack on your own. So like, if you're just standing there, you auto-attack. The difference here is that if you move, you don't auto-attack anymore. So you have to be standing still in order to do so. And I thought that would be a problem, but I think the reason they do that is because this game is more about rhythm than anything else. And what I mean by that is every weapon that you use, which is tied to a specific blade, has a kind of sequence of 3, where it'll be like 1 slice, and then 2 slice, and then 3 slice, like 1 up, 1 like to the side, 1 below. And if you time the use of your art just after you've used an auto attack, a blue kind of sphere will pop up, and it basically increases the amount of energy you build. So it's to your benefit to basically time your arts with the rhythm of your auto attack. So in the original games, like, I never really knew when was the best time to use my art. It was like, okay, I just use it now because it's recharged and it seems like I should do it because I'm behind the guy. Whereas now it feels much more purposeful, where I am deliberately waiting until the 3rd and final strike, because that's when you get the most benefit for it. So I'm waiting for the 3rd strike, and then I press the art. And so I get a bonus for it, it fills up my meter faster, and it starts like building my special. So the systems in this game are basically built like Lego blocks on top of one another, where you have your arts, which build to your specials. So you have like 3 levels of special, and each character can basically build one special on top of another, and they're all elementally based. So say I use a fire special, I need to wait for another character to build up to level 2 of a special that chains onto that. So say a water special. And then I need to wait for my 3rd character to build up to their 3rd special, which chains on top of that. And when you get all 3 of those in a row, you basically get a combo. And that combo will do a ton of damage. It will inflict the enemy with a certain orb, and they will be at the mercy of a different attack. You can't basically repeat them. It's kind of like in Smash Brothers, where if you keep using the same move again and again, the damage will reduce. So you can't keep using the same combo again and again. So you have to like find different pathways to the end point. So instead of starting with water, maybe this time I start with rock.
It sounds quite satisfying.
Yeah, it really is. It's definitely much more of a... And the thing that's good about this game is they teach you these mechanics very slowly. It is incredibly snail-paced in terms of introducing them, so that you get accustomed to one system before you move on to the other, and then you're eventually just building and building and getting knowledge of all these until you really have a mastery of it. And I think that X never did a good job of explaining itself, and I didn't really dig in enough to the menus of the original to understand.
Would I like this the best then in terms of fighting mechanics?
I think you probably would, as long as you tried to understand it. And I think that's the important thing, is once you get a handle on it, once you know what you're doing, you can really do well in this combat system, to the point where, as I was saying, I just beat the Chapter 9 boss, and I pulled off an insane fucking combo that did 2 million damage with a chain attack, that was just absolutely absurd. And it was because I built up like 4 different level 3 specials, all different elements. So I had like ice, wind, rock, and fire or something all on him at once. So like basically once you've done a level 3 special, they have this orb that like spins around them. And in order to, once you do a chain attack, if you hit them during the chain attack with the opposite of that element, it breaks and it creates a burst, so you know in chain attacks in the original Xenoblade, I never knew how it really worked, but sometimes it would go again. So like you would do the 3 attacks with your 3 characters, and sometimes the B prompt would pop up, like the quick time event B, where you'd press it and then you do another round with those characters. This time it's much more obvious, because if you burst, which is basically destroying one of the orbs with an attack that you use, then you'll get another round. So you're trying to use the elements you have to counterattack them and burst them. And so if you do that, you get another round, and then you burst another one and get another round. So you can chain this for like 4 rounds of a chain attack, which builds up to just an absurd amount of damage by the end. And that's what I've been doing, is just basically creating a party that has a good variety of blades that I can use to just absolutely annihilate enemies. And it's been so satisfying to do that.
Has it felt less difficult as a result? Is it?
Yeah.
There's parts of the other 2 games that are just incredibly tough.
I'd say
particularly X.
Yeah, X has some horrible difficulty spikes, and the original Xenoblade also does as well. And the problem I'm having is I don't know whether it's because I was bad at those games' combat that I had trouble, or whether this game is just generally easier and it has a more understandable combat system. There's something about it that makes it much easier to stay alive, because you have healing arts, which will help you if you have a healer on your team. But also, a lot of the blades you have certain arts that will spawn potions. And if you upgrade that art enough, like you have a higher percentage chance of spawning like 2 or 3 potions when you use that art. So I have a setup where I have a lot of potion spawning blades, which means that I'm always able to keep my health at a good place, and I'm never like down in the dumps and trying to keep people alive. I do have to, obviously, like people die, and so I do have to revive them, but it seems like my chain attack builds faster. It seems like I'm generally just way more in control of situations, and I really like the combat in this game. It's just been incredibly fun to pull off. It does mean that battles take a very long time, because in order to build to those chains, you need to have a lot of HP on the enemy, because otherwise you're never going to get there, right? Like, I think a lot of people were frustrated with this game when they saw it in previews, because it looked like enemies had so much health, and they do. They have an absurd amount of health, but the reason that's there is because these systems exist for you to basically break that health down as fast as possible once you get a mastery over it. And it's very satisfying to pull that stuff off. I've just really enjoyed it. So yeah, and in terms of like leveling up and grinding, I've not really had to do that much, and it's mainly because I've gone out of my way to do side quests. I've been off the beaten path. Side quests generally are more engaging, and they kind of fall into a couple of different categories. There are blade side quests, which are every single blade in the game. So the way it works, Bally, is it's kind of like loot boxes. I know, everyone's favorite thing. Okay. Every time you want a new blade, you basically have to pull a random core, and it will just randomly assign you a blade. And so most of the blades are kind of generic ones. They kind of look like robots, like / aliens, where they have like some blue aura around them, and they don't have an identity to them. Whereas the rare blades are the ones that have like full character art and are like designed by a different artist and have unique stories to themselves. And I got kind of lucky early on, because I had for my first 2 characters, I was able to get a full 3 blades for them, because you can carry 3 at once, that were all rare blades. So I was like swimming in it. I was like, oh great, I just have all these. I got pretty lucky. And so they all have their own quest lines you can go down, which have like full cutscenes with voice acting, which I was super surprised at. But the blade side quests are just infuriating. There are kind of gates in this game, similar to Metroid, in the sense that you need to be able to do certain field skills. Like some blades will have a leaping ability, where if you're climbing up a vine, it'll be like you need to use the leap ability to get further up this vine, otherwise you can't go anywhere higher. And maybe you don't have a blade that has a leaping ability, so you have to randomly get one, or maybe your blade doesn't have a high enough level in it, or you can use multiple blades to kind of get past these challenges. So if it's a level 7, if you have like 3 blades that have level 1 in that thing, and like one that has level 2, another one that has level 2, you can just have those 5 blades equipped at once and you'll pass the challenge. It doesn't have to be just one blade that has the field skill. But the problem is, every time you get to one of these obstacles, you have to go into the menu, go through your blades, look through the skills, find which one has that, equip it to your party member, make sure you have enough party members that have the skill, while also being able to have another skill potentially if it's a 2-skill challenge, and then go back to it and press it. And then afterwards, you change all your blades back, because clearly the ones you're using to overcome this challenge are not the ones you're using in combat. So if you get into a battle straight after, you're going to be screwed, because you're using bad people who are just there to get you past this field skill thing. So in terms of like tedium, that's definitely the worst of it in this game. It can get pretty bad, and you do get bogged down in the menus, because there are so many different things you can equip. Like, your blades have their own affinity trees, they have cores, they have weapon upgrades you can put on them. Your driver has to upgrade the arts of the blades. They have accessories of their own. They have their own affinity tree. Like, it is just an absurd number of stuff to keep track of. And you have to keep track of this for like 5 different characters with 3 different blades each. So like times it by a bajillion, and it gets a little bit crazy. But I don't know. I'm kind of one of these people who likes the micromanaging in this game, and maybe it's because there is kind of a colour to the menus, and it's fun to kind of go through and see the artwork.
Is the font big?
Oh, it's massive, dude. Like if you're talking about a change from Xenoblade Chronicles X, the cutscene dialogue is enormous on the screen. Everything is just really huge. So when you're playing in handheld mode, there is no problem whatsoever. You are not getting lost in it. So that's wonderful. That's a great addition, and thank God they took that on board. But yeah, it tended to be that the Blade side quests were very tedious and there are some that I still haven't completed because it's like, go across every region and find this one challenge you have to overcome, which means like going to every place, going there, and by the time you get there, maybe you don't have the abilities yet to even do it, so you've just wasted your time. And it's frustrating. There's this one quest that I'm in the middle of doing with one of the Blades who's like a polar bear girl, and she's a singer, and there's some really cool cutscenes with her. But in order to get her affinity up, you need to send her away on these merc missions, which is essentially like Metal Gear Solid 5, where you basically send away mercenaries to go do stuff, and they bring stuff back, like experience points and like items and things. But it's a real time, it's like a mobile game timer, where it's like, come back in 10 minutes and we'll have brought this stuff back. But it's fine in this game because you're doing a million things at once, so it's kind of a thing that's going on in the background. But you have to send her away on these 10-minute missions constantly, like 9 times each, for like these 3 missions, and then you get up the next level of the affinity tree, and now the guy's like, okay, when she has 5,000 fans, then she'll go up the next level. And I'm like, oh my god, she only has 300, and I've already sent her on like 50 fucking missions. How many fucking missions do I have to send her on? It's just, it gets absurd because that thing like recounts every 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes I'm opening my menu and going into it and resetting her and sending... I need to slow down because there is a lot in this game. A fucking lot. And I'm very conflicted because I've generally been really enjoying the game parts of it, but there are just a lot of little things that are not quite living up to what I wanted the game to be. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's a really difficult game to talk about because I've put so much time into it because it is incredibly Moorish. And yeah, you know, there are problems. There are things that I would like to change. I think updates could maybe fix them, make things more streamlined. But yeah, generally, like, the writing's been decent in the side quests. Like, the regular side quests have been fun to do, and there seems to be less of them, but they go on for longer, each individual one. And sometimes I get surprised by side quests that suddenly have a cutscene in them, and I'm like, oh, whoa, that was kind of out of nowhere, and it's good to kind of take you off your feet with that stuff. But yeah, I think I've pretty much covered most things about this game. Oh, the one other thing I want to bring up is that heart-to-hearts are now voice-acted, and heart-to-hearts now don't require you to build affinity between party members, which was a problem in the old games because I never built affinity because I was really bad at like using all the characters, and it took forever to build it. So now heart-to-hearts are just required that you have either the Blade or the party member required, and you can just view it, and having the voice acting just makes them so much better because they were kind of bland beforehand. And they're elevated now. And the very last thing, which we have to mention, the soundtrack for this game is fantastic. I'm a huge fan of it. No surprises. The original Xenoblade is one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. I think that generally the music is not as strong when it comes to individual tracks. Like, I think of Engage the Enemy, and I think of Tragic Decision. I think of like all these fantastic individual songs from the first soundtrack, whereas here there are less like individual songs that stand out, but the songs across the board, I would say, are generally stronger as a package. Like, every single one is hummable, every single one is memorable. And it's a weird juxtaposition because whereas in the first game I thought the kind of more bombastic, like cutscene based soundtrack songs were stronger, in this game it's like piano songs that are much, much more hitting me. There is a place in particular in this game that is like this grand, like, religious chapel, and the choral arrangement is like this incredible choir of just singing this astonishing song. I'll probably put as the break music, but it is absolutely wondrous, and really is nothing like I've heard in other games before, and is an amazing part of that soundtrack. Generally, like, any choral stuff that they've put into this game is amazing, and yeah, I've really loved that stuff. And the Xenoblade things that make it feel like a Xenoblade thing are still here. The world still feels fucking enormous. There's this one part where there's this giant staircase that I was looking up, and I'm like, wow, yeah, just like taking my breath away. Absolutely, this staircase is stupidly long, and of course it would be because this is a Xenoblade game. But my god, as I camera pan around Rex as he runs up the staircase, it looks incredible. And I really wish the video recording feature was in this game, but alas. Didn't make it in time. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is it's a lot of things. There's a lot to it. I think it has parts that are incredibly strong. I think it has much weaker elements. I think if we talk about the 3 Xenoblade games and the things they do best, I think you can put them into the categories of world building and storytelling is the strongest in the original game. Exploration is the strongest in X, and combat and kind of gameplay systems are the best in Xenoblade 2. So if Takahashi and his team can go away and create a game that kind of combines all 3 of these into the perfect package, I think it might be my favorite game ever made, is what I'm trying to say.
A remake of the first Xenoblade with the mechanics from this Xenoblade?
Maybe, but then the first Xenoblade, as much as the exploring is fun, I don't think the exploring is as good as in Xenoblade X.
I actually agree.
Yeah.
Even though I've not played as much X as you.
Yeah, because, I mean, the thing about X is that you had this really fast run. Like, you just sprinted across the plains. Your jump was super high. Eventually, you got the scales, which just changed the elevation of everything. So it definitely... It impacted that game a huge amount when you're kind of just walking through that and wondering and admiring the world. Very last thing before we close out. It's very interesting because the way they've balanced this game is, you remember in the other games where you would find landmarks and it would give you experience points for doing that, so you get experience for exploring. This game still does that, but it doesn't tell you that you're getting the experience points because there's now a bonus experience system whereby if you don't want to over-level yourself, which I don't know why, but some people in JRPGs want to have a big challenge and that's what they like. If you don't want to over-level yourself and yet you still want to do all the side quests and explore everywhere, there is a system by when you go to an inn and you'll have bonus experience accumulated from doing side quests and exploring these different places. And there have been points in the story where I gain like 5 levels from going to an inn. I'm like, oh shit, that's kind of awesome. Like now I feel much more powerful and in a place where I'm able to take things on more. And that's great. Like, I think that offering the opportunity for some people who want to take that into account is there, and if you don't want it, you can ignore it. So it works out well. And it gives a function for an inn in a Xenoblade game, because in these games you automatically recharge health outside of battle, so inns were never really purposeful for anything. So I guess they've kind of created a reason to have them now, which is cool. I guess despite that, like, even though I've been gaining those extra levels, I was still like a little bit under-leveled for this boss, and I still beat him pretty handily. So, I just think the game generally is less challenging, but still incredibly satisfying to play.
Cool.
So
I'm sure we're going to talk about it lots next time as well, both with what we've been playing in Game of the Year. We'll see.
I guess so. We'll see. We're going to have to discuss that for sure. It's a bit of a mess of a game, but also I fucking really like it a lot. So conflicted, but Xenoblade 2, if I say anything, it's that this game took my life away for 70 hours within the space of 10 days, and I think that's more praise that I can give it than anything else I even say on this podcast. So there you go. Kind of has me by the balls.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, let's close out the first segment, and join us after the break where we'll be going through some of your Game of the Year nominees and winners that you sent us via email. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. It's time for the second segment and that's your emails. But as this is our first Game of the Year special podcast for 2017, it is of course our traditional games of the year that didn't actually come out this year that we've all been playing. This has been, a big tradition of the show, mainly because we've talked a lot through sort of the Wii U period, and there's been long periods where top games just haven't been coming out. So 2017 has actually been an exception, I would argue, on the show, where it's just been completely jam-packed with brand new games that we've been playing this year. So
I played more new games this year than I did old games, and that's usually not the case at all. So it's absolutely crazy. Yeah.
Right, and I'm about the same. So we got to keep up traditions of the show. So this is definitely going to be a segment that keeps reoccurring. But I would argue that maybe other years have been stronger, perhaps.
For sure. Just
because we went back and played some classics. But for this segment, we're going to be talking about your games of the year that you played this year that didn't come out this year. And we will mention ours in the next segment.
And where could people send those to, Bally?
Of course, MB, how could I forget? Please send. We now want your games of the year that did come out this year. So we want those for the next show. So
just 2017 Game of the Year, essentially.
Exactly, 2017 Game of the Year. All platforms. We want to hear everything because there's been some incredible games, not just Nintendo platforms, coming out this year. The email address, I should say, is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. And we've also opened up the thread on our Discord server where you can join our Twitter account @TNL Podcast. Jump in the Discord server. It's pinned. No, it's not pinned. It's actually just linked to the Twitter account. Jump in there and you can post your top games of 2017 in there as well. It would be greatly appreciated. And that's exactly what Tim from our Discord server did. So his top 3 games of the year that didn't actually come out this year. Number 3, Shovel Knight, Shovel of Hope. I was very hesitant to jump into Shovel Knight. Normally, platforming isn't my favorite genre, but I'm glad I did. Eventually, I will get around to the DLC, but I needed a break after beating the main campaign. Number 2, Crypt of the Necrodancer. First saw this one on Games Done Quick and picked it up on sale. Absolutely adore this little game, and the music is incredible. I suck at it though. Number 1, Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. Despite its AAA open-world flaws, minimal icon bomb, to me this game was just pure fun. Love how overpowered you become by the end of the game.
Cool, that's a neat little list there. I haven't played Crypt of the Necrodancer. That's one that a lot of people bring up, and it's kind of like a rhythm, like dungeon crawling game. I've seen it played, and it seems very weird and hard for me to get into, but I'll maybe give it a go at some point. But yeah, I enjoyed Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. I don't know, I feel like that game was pretty overrated after I played it, but I think it's fun. I think it's okay.
That was 2014, right?
Yeah, that was the bad year. That was the year when everyone... Well, I mean, it was a good year for Nintendo. There was Bayonetta 2 and Smash Brothers and Mario Kart. Like, that was a great Nintendo year. But for everyone else, it was kind of a bummer.
Its sequel came out this year, and it's hardly been talked about.
No, because it's like... it's just drowning in microtransactions, and it's like overly long, and... Yeah,
even if that game had been stellar, I feel like it wouldn't have been talked about much, just because this year has been so incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, hard to stand out.
MBZ, have you got the next one?
Yeah, so the next one is from friend of the show, Devon from Emblemcast, who posts, so in no particular order, I'll list my 5 favorite non-2017 games I played this year. Number 5, Overwatch, probably the best shooter of the decade. Man, I've missed competitive team-based shooters, and Overwatch hits that high on teamwork and coordination. Number 4, Stardew Valley. There's nothing that brightens my day more than putting an hour into my little farm at the end of a long day. Number 3, Shovel Knight. What took me so long? The best NES game that was never released on the NES. Number 2, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Do I even need to explain? No, I don't. Number 1, Bloodborne. This has risen into my top 10 or 5 of all time. Masterful game design and world. And then honourable mention, Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Only put about 4 hours into this game, but it's blown me away at every turn. Certainly would make it onto the list if I had played more of it. CD Projekt Red deserves an award for this game. Oh, wait. I believe The Witcher 3 won a absurd number of Game of the Year awards the year it came out. It wasn't quite mine, unfortunately. It would have been if Ori and the Blind Forest didn't exist, but I certainly can agree with him, because he was just telling me he recently got a new PC, and so he'd been playing Witcher on that new PC, which is it's a hell of a game to break in a new PC, I'll tell you that much.
When I saw Witcher 3 running on your PC, Emmy said, I was like... video games.
Yeah.
I was like, how can we go by anything else? It just looks so great. And that was like a good 3 years ago. I think I first.
It was 2015, so it was 2 years ago, and I think it's probably still the best looking game you've ever seen in your life.
God,
so.
That was just wow. Wow.
So yeah, some very good picks here. See, the thing with Bloodborne and the Souls game, Bally, is like I think From Software are going to be bringing Souls games to Switch probably. So maybe that's where we do it. I don't know.
I hear Bloodborne is like the best though. Like it's I think they smoothed out a lot of things from the formula, to my knowledge, and I mean it's obviously very dark and not exactly a world I would enjoy being in for any long
me
period
neither.
of
That's
time.
why I generally steer away from those.
I mean, we could maybe like co-op it at some point.
Sure.
Just like behind the surface.
Exactly.
Because there are some really, really twisted like creatures in that game from what I've seen.
100%. Absolutely.
So our next post is from Easy Money, who's also from our Discord server. He's just got a list, so here we go. It's number 5, Inside. I won't say much because I don't want to spoil, but the praise MBZ give this game is well deserved. Number 4, Vanquish, another game developed by Platinum, and it's a weird merge of Western and Japanese design. Number 3, Subsurface Circular, a strange game with an interesting story and engaging and unique puzzles. Number 2, Metal Gear Solid Rising, Revengeance, possibly Platinum's best game, second only to Bayonetta 2. Number 1, Dark Souls. I was always hesitant to play this game because of the reputation it has for being brutally difficult. I found that it's way easier than people lead you to believe. It also has the best level design I've ever seen in a video game.
Well, now we have 2 lists with Souls games at number 1, Bally. Just reinforcing the point.
Yeah. But maybe we should try it. And Inside, coming to Switch next year.
Yeah, it's coming to Switch. Oh my God, I'm so excited for you to play that game. Holy shit.
I'm very keen to play that game. I'm going to sit down and I'm not going to move an inch and I'm just going to beat it. I think it... And I actually, so this is the advantage of my stupid memory. I looked up the story for this game yonks ago and I wasn't really paying attention to much to what I was reading.
Yeah.
So it's not actually spoiled for me, and I mean that genuinely. I'm not concealing like I've heard something. Anyway,
Bally has a weird memory.
I'm excited to read that. It satisfied me at the time.
The one I want to pick up here is Subsurface Circular, because that's actually a game that was kind of stealth released this year, and it's by Mike Bithell, who made Thomas Was Alone.
Oh, right.
And yeah, it's on Steam, and I think it's relatively cheap. I was thinking about maybe grabbing it in a Steam sale at some point. So yeah, cool to see it represented on this list.
Nice.
So next up we have Chaotix, who says he's got a list of 3 games here. I'm not sure if they're ordered or not, but let's just go through them. Shovel Knight. Still haven't played the DLC for this game, but I love a game with this kind of style and a good platformer. Speaking of which, VVV. I bought an entire Humble Bundle because of this game. A couple of other things worth purchasing, including Stardew Valley, which I haven't played yet either, and could be easily sucked in. This game was worth collecting all the secret items. And Super Meat Boy. I played this in a team with work colleagues and was the key player here. We never finished the final boss. It was still fun. That's a trio of excellent platformers.
It's a trio of games we've talked about very recently.
They're all 3 of them, yeah. Very
3
true.
Incredible platformers.
So yeah, I think Shovel Knight just getting a lot of representation on this list. I'm really surprised that a lot of our listeners only just got round to it this year. Right. Maybe it's the Switch factor, Bally.
Probably,
that's why people have jumping in.
Plus, Spectre of Torment came out this year. We forget, I think
you're right.
It was just after the Switch launch, because I remember there being
that is eligible for our top 5 next week.
Absolutely,
so, potential.
It is. So our next email is actually from our Discord server from Capsule J, who's from Georgia in the USA. Dear Bally and MBZ, this year I played through 30 games and they were split pretty much perfectly evenly between games released in 2017 and prior years. Here is my top 10 list of games I played this year that didn't come out this year. Number 10, Hotline Miami. Number 9, Broken Age. Number 8, Metal Gear Solid 3. Number 7, Mercenary Saga 2. Number 6, Dishonored 1 and 2. Number 5, Super Mario 3D World. Number 4, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Number 3, Hitman Season 1. Number 2, Witcher 3. And number 1, Chrono Trigger. Highlights from the list include the magical experience of playing through Chrono Trigger for the first time, finishing the entire campaign of 3D World in co-op mode with my wife, and squinting at my tiny OG 3DS screen trying to see what the heck was going on in Metal Gear Solid 3. Thanks for another great year and looking forward to hearing y'all's lists.
Thanks, Capital J. That's a great list there.
That is such a list.
Varied games. A bit of cheating with Dishonored 1 and 2 in the same spot, but I'll let you get away with it, to be fair. Yeah, man, Chrono Trigger, Bally, you got to get to it at some point.
I was devastated it never came to SNES Classic, but there will be a way. I feel like...
Bally, there might be a way of, I don't know, getting every game on your SNES Classic.
Maybe.
Yeah, seems, I don't know.
You say that, I'd rather pay a very unreasonable price to play that game on my Switch. Like at some point.
All right.
I would
it'll probably
pay
happen.
a lot of money for that game.
Yeah, I was seeing Capital J actually talk about in the Discord about choosing between Witcher 3 and Chrono Trigger for his number 1. That's a choice I'm glad I didn't have to make, because I think that I played Witcher 3 in the year it came out at the same time I played Chrono Trigger, so they were both on 2 separate lists, so I didn't have to decide.
And DKC Tropical Freeze, like, glad you're coming to the party. It's where it's at.
Well, there you go.
That's
it's good.
Hot stuff.
Good party.
What a
Absolutely.
game. What a game.
All right, our next one is from Chris B, who sent via email and says, "Hey, NBZ and Bally, hope I'm not too late to submit my games I played this year that didn't come out this year." And then he gave us the acronym for it, which is GIPTYTDCOTY, which is just, when you look at it written out, is absurd. Oh, my goodness. So he says, firstly, my game of the year is, well, we'll maybe talk about that last time, or next time, because that will be part of the 2017 stuff, but he says that he hasn't bought a Switch yet, so many of these things are played on other platforms in no particular order. Tembo the Badass Elephant, you've both stated your love for Tropical Freeze, and that remains one of my favorite games of all time, so it always makes me smile when Bally finds a way of slotting it into conversation, just like he did now. Tembo feels incredibly similar in terms of gameplay and charm. It gets incredibly difficult, but is always fair, so I think NBZ in particular would get a lot out of it. That's an interesting one, because that's a Game Freak game, Tembo the Badass Elephant.
Yes, I wondered where I'd heard about it before. Yeah,
it only came out on PlayStation and Xbox. I wonder if they bring it to Switch at some point in the future. Could be potential. Next up is Life is Strange. Oh my god, this game, such an emotional roller coaster, but I still found myself thinking about it even after beating it. I don't want to spoil the storyline for anyone, but it absolutely blew me away in terms of its narrative, and no decision ever felt like the right/wrong one. Please play this. I actually watched a playthrough of Life is Strange, so I kind of feel bad for doing that. But you know, I don't know. I understand why people love that game so much. It's very cool. Batman Arkham Knight. I wasn't sold on it at first, but once the tank puzzle stopped being so prevalent, the gameplay and sheer wealth of content kept me happy for a long time. Tales from the Borderlands. I wasn't a fan of Episode 5, but the other 4 were brilliant. Definitely still worth playing. I'm hoping to check out the Handsome Collection as a result of playing this. Ori and the Blind Forest, partly played on NBZ recommendation, did not disappoint. I have nothing to add that he hasn't already said, but my poor feels are in absolute tatters. Fire Emblem Fates Birthright. I have the other paths too, but couldn't bring myself to come back so soon as Birthright so perfectly told the story I wanted to play. Rhythm Paradise Megamix. Thought this game would be a throwaway minigame collection, but it was so much more than that. It's such a joy to play and is worth digging out a 3DS one last time just to experience it. Conker's Bad Fur Day. The controls aren't great, fall damage is way too harsh, and it has the usual N64 camera issues. With that said, I laughed out loud while playing this game. The story is very aware of how ridiculous it is. The references are great for people who have a handle on 90s pop culture, and the soundtrack is awesome. It resonated with me more than I ever expected, particularly the dialogue during the final scene. I've also caught myself humming the famous song from the Sloprano chapter on more than one occasion since beating it. Biggest gaming disappointments of the year he has as well, which are, I won't read through all these, but I'll just name them. Halo 5 Guardians, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, and Blast Core. And he says, if you read this whole thing, thank you. I did go on a bit. Looking forward to hearing your GIPTYTDCOTY. Until then, lads, stay awesome. Well, thank you, Chris, for that incredibly long email detailing your favourite games.
Nice shout out. Rhythm Paradise Megamix.
Yeah.
I played this when it came out from last year, I want to say. And yeah, great game. Like, didn't get talked about a ton when it came out, and because I guess it is a remix of like lots of existing games, but it's such a great package on 3DS. I really honestly enjoyed it more than almost all the games in the WarioWare series, and it's that similar style. Like, I can't recommend that game enough, and it looks incredible on 3DS. Like, it's not difficult to go back to in terms of like style and look, because I sometimes feel a bit weird going back to 3DS from Switch, and I think a game like Rhythm Paradise like works really well on that system.
Yeah, totally. I'd like to get to it eventually. I think there was actually a My Nintendo discount on it recently that I was gonna get on, but then I was like, there's a lot of other things.
There's a lot of stuff to play.
It's pretty difficult. The other one I want to shout out is Tales from the Borderlands, which I think I can confidently now say is my favorite Telltale game. I really love the first season of The Walking Dead, but Tales from the Borderlands it's a funny game, and that is so incredibly hard to do. You know, like, it's so difficult to do comedy in a video game, and it's just such a good time.
Any chance that will come to Switch?
I mean, you know, there are Telltale games on Switch right now. There's Batman, there's Minecraft.
Do we know how they run? I'm very intrigued by this.
No,
I do want to try one.
Yeah, I need to look up some reviews of those.
I'm going to check out some reviews of Batman and definitely catch it in a sale or something, because I'm keen to try that.
That's a good kind of co-op experience to play with decisions and stuff. So, yeah. And
our final list, which is emailed in from Cerbus, who of course is from the internet. Esteemed hosts MBZ and Bally, I played a ton of games in 2017, a lot of which didn't come out this year. I'm going to limit this list to 5 games I played this year that came out on Nintendo platforms. Number 5, Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. As someone with no nostalgia for anything before the GBA, I found Mario 3, and to a lesser extent, World, to be hugely overrated. Well said. I wasn't expecting much from the original platformer, but I found it to be highly enjoyable, easily the best of the bunch, with really tight level design. Also, the deluxe version lets you start with the level you were on when you run out of lives. Number 4, Little Inferno. The Tamura Corporation makes just the kind of games that I like. Quirky, witty, and stylized games, always with a new mechanic that is truly nothing like anything we've seen before or since. While I prefer and would recommend World of Goo and especially Human Resource Machine over Little Inferno, it is still a really creative and enjoyable game to play. Number 3, WarioWare Twisted. I finally imported a copy of this. I love the WarioWare games, and this is another really good one. Gyro worked a lot better than I expected and was really surprised by the ahead of its time tactile feedback when rotating. A very interesting game to go back to in the year of the Joy-Con. Number 2, Tokyo Mirage Sessions #FE.
Sharp FE.
Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE.
There we go.
I'm very conflicted on this game. The story, side quests, and characters are all woefully uninteresting. The game overstays its welcome by about 10 hours.
Agreed.
There are so many little things I find annoying about it, such as having to go back to Tiki to access the weapon system. However, this game has a killer soundtrack, a colourful aesthetic, and perhaps my favourite battle system in an RPG ever. This is a game I could recommend everyone to play, but not necessarily finish. Number 1, Mother 3 fan translation. It's a bit darker than Earthbound and maintains a lot of what makes Earthbound so great. The story is arguably better, but the whole experience just felt less streamlined. Also, it moves away from the urban fantasy setting towards straight up fantasy, which I think loses a lot of what was special about Earthbound. That being said, still an absolutely fantastic game, and the fan translation is excellent. Thank you for reading my long email. As always, I'll hopefully write in again next time for 2017 Game of the Year, Acerbis.
Well, a very good list there, including, Acerbis is someone who wrote in during our Earthbound backlog club, and so it's cool that he's gone back and played Mother 3. I think we're still holding out hope to play it officially eventually. I don't know how long that'll be.
Oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
We'll see. I think I can echo his thoughts on Tokyo Mirage Sessions, although I don't agree about it being a good battle system. I think it's a fine battle system. But yeah, that soundtrack is so good. I really like it, because I gave you a couple of songs from that soundtrack to play in your Japan episode. They are some jams, some hot jams, I will say. I think
WarioWare Twisted might be my favorite WarioWare. Like, that is an incredibly interesting and unusual game, and definitely
it's also a game that we didn't have to import because I think we both bought it while we were in America.
Yes, we both went there because we smuggled our Mercury back into the EU. So
yeah, basically. Illegally.
And also, Acerbis, massive praise on your shout outs that Mario 3 and to a lesser extent World are slightly overrated. So thanks for that.
He says they're hugely overrated, which I think overrated. I also agree with.
Yeah.
So.
And I've played Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, and it's definitely it's like a smaller, more streamlined, almost more enjoyable game than those other two. Like, it's just very quick and snappy. And I haven't played Mario Bros. 3, so I still need to get to that. So don't judge me on that. But yeah, it's a nice little game.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was quite the number of games to talk about. A lot of different, unusual picks, as usual, which we love, and some really big, heavy hitters that we've talked about a lot before. So yeah, thanks everyone for sending those in. And as I said at the top of the segment, we still need more emails. We need them for your games of the year that came out in 2017, which we're going to be talking about next time on the show. So please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. And of course, you can also post your picks, your shout outs to our Discord server. So follow us on Twitter. That's @TNL Podcast. And then hit the link. You'll be in the Discord server and you can post there, and we'll bring those all together and talk about them next time on the show. So yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's all we've got time for our second segment, but join us in the third segment where we will be talking about our own games of the year that we played this year that didn't actually come out this year.
Alright everyone, welcome back to the final part of today's show, which is of course our countdown of our games of the year that didn't actually come out this year for 2017. As we said before, it's been a weird year in terms of Nintendo kicking fucking ass, and so a lot of good video games came out this year, so we spent most of our time playing those, which means maybe the list on this end will be a little weaker, but hey, that's how it goes sometimes. I still think my list of 10 is a list of 10 solid games, so I'm happy with it.
Mine's good. I definitely played a lot of these before the Switch came out as well. Which
yeah. A couple of months we had there of buffer time.
Squeezing a few.
Absolutely.
Shall I start with my number 10, MBZ?
Yeah, let's start with your number 10, Bally.
My number 10 is F-Zero on the Super Nintendo.
Nice.
Now, I actually played this on the Wii U earlier this year.
Right, yeah.
Well before the SNES Classic came out. And it's a really solid racing game. And I must admit there was a lot of nostalgia in it, in the sense that the music is just really, really great. Like, we've heard so many remix songs of F-Zero tunes over the years, especially in like Smash Brothers and now Mario Kart and this, that, and the other. And to actually play the original game where it all stemmed from was a very, very satisfying experience. I must say that I'm not very good at this game in comparison to other F-Zero games. I feel like I'm better at, so there's a lot of like work for me to get better at this game. I really struggled on the harder modes.
I struggle on the easy modes, mate. So you know.
Well, I breezed through them, but like this is
oh wow,
some
savage.
Of the tracks are some of the tracks are really unforgiving. And yeah, here's to 2018 where hopefully F-Zero might come around this time around. Who knows?
just living on a press on, absolutely.
We'll see. But yeah, it's definitely worth going back to.
Weird reverse nostalgia with the music, I guess, because you've known it in like other forms, and now you're going back to the original. It's cool when that happens.
NBZ, what was your number 10?
My number 10 is a similar case. It is Star Fox on the Super Nintendo. So I did not expect, having gone into every Star Fox game I've ever played, to be putting this anywhere near a top 10 list of any kind in my life.
You were not hot on Star Fox 64. And,
no.
Yeah.
I was like kind of very, very bad at that game, and so it made it a frustrating exercise, and I really didn't enjoy it. And I'm not great at Star Fox on Super Nintendo either, but I do have save states on the SNES Classic, which helps. And it's just an astonishing achievement of a game. I think I'm more blown away by the fact that it works and is actually doing this thing, and it did it all the way back then. It's just a technical marvel, and the fact that the frame rate is like 10 is weird, but it's weirdly...
It holds up. It does.
It's strange really that it actually works, because I usually can't stand anything that's like a low frame rate, but because it looks old and it's supposed to like run that way because it is that old, there's this weird forgiveness I have in my heart for it. I'm like...
It does stuff like... The hitboxes on the bosses and stuff are incredibly loud and clear as to where you're meant to hit at what point.
Right.
And in a game that is running, as you said, at 10 frames per second, and some bits look a little bit clunky, actually flashing yellow and red squares and shapes appearing on bosses is just a really satisfying thing to do, to know where to shoot, and like the sound design on what happens when you shoot those areas is very satisfying as well. So it's very clear when you're actually doing damage, which is so important on a game where there's a lot going on the screen.
Yeah, there's so much flying at you as well, and sometimes it's difficult to know whether it's your teammate or whether it's an enemy, and that happened to me a few times where I accidentally hit a teammate thinking they were an enemy. It gets a little bit tough, but I think the biggest thing about this game is it's the most a Star Fox game I've played has felt like Star Wars, in the sense that somehow, despite being this very limited technology and hardware, it produces scale. You know, it produces the sense of a intergalactic battle going on, and you're like there's one level in particular near the end where you're flying through like cargo ships and blowing up the center of them and flying out the back, and taking down enemy fighters as you get to the boss, and it feels like you're really going through this battlefield that has taken place, and yet it's partially mostly in your imagination, because it's just a bunch of polygons on the screen that produce this effect. It's crazy that it works, and I was thrilled to like be able to jump into this and actually enjoy it. And again, there is that weird reverse nostalgia with the music and with the sound design and the weird voice acting popping in here and there. It's pretty crazy, and I'm glad I played it, because I really didn't expect anything from it whatsoever. I expected to just pick it up to check it out, to unlock. Actually, it was just to unlock Star Fox 2 on the Super Nintendo Classic,
right?
And I ended up just playing through the whole thing. Obviously, there are other paths which are much more difficult, which I haven't gone back through yet, but I would like to in the future, because I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I'm the same. I need to go back to those other paths. My number 9 is Swords and Soldiers 2.
Oh, wow, nice.
I played this. This is another one of those Nintendo Humble Bundle games from 2015?
I don't know. The years have disappeared, and my eyes have bled.
I've gotten a lot out of that Humble Bundle, haven't I?
Some mileage for sure, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a sort of mobile style RTS game, I guess. It's sort of 2D scrolling RTS game where your units go from the left of the screen to the right of the screen, and you can control like your economy, the money coming in, traditional sort of tower defense and that style. It just works really well. It's got some incredibly hilarious cutscenes and accents and stereotypes, but I mean, they are making fun of Scottish people massively, but I just kind of roll with it, and it's actually very funny. And
at least we now have Xenoblade 2, where the Scottish people are like treated with a lot of respect.
A lot of respect, exactly. Yeah. So it's a very fun, quirky game, and as someone like, there's not a ton of tower defense games on most home consoles. It's a very mobile style game in that sense. So I don't generally play many mobile games at all. So it was nice to try out something in that style, and it was fresh and done well, I thought, apart from
going out your comfort zone a bit as well, I think.
Exactly, definitely out of my comfort zone.
Sweet.
MBZ.
My number 9 is Super Castlevania 4. The SNES Classic is going to get a lot of representation here, I'll let you know up front. This game is a weird one because it's essentially in the style of the original Castlevania games on NES, but then you have the differences in the whip, where you can whip diagonally now, and you can also like flail it around like a rope, and it just like kind of slows things down, and it does a lot of weird stuff. It's one of those games where I'm not sure I really like the look of it. It's some Super Nintendo games hold up incredibly well, and Super Castlevania 4 has more kind of gritty, grimy look to it, which, you know, somewhat expected because it's a Castlevania game, but it still plays really well, and I enjoyed going through those levels. They are pretty long. Like, I feel like they overstay their welcome a little bit in terms of there are multiple sections per area when you're going through, and if you end up dying, then you have to repeat the entire thing from the beginning again. But it's not as difficult, so I think it gets away with it, because especially in those opening levels, you're not going to have to repeat them. It's just maybe later on where it gets a little harder, and it's like, oh god, I have to go right back to the start there and begin my adventure again. But it has the patented Castlevania mechanics and gameplay that I have always enjoyed, and it's a good ride, and I think it's a good way to jump into the series. So if you want to play it, Bally, go ahead and
another
give it a
one I
shot.
need to get on. I actually own that one, so might as well do it. My number 8 is Retro City Rampage DX. I played this on 3DS, but it's actually on Switch now, I noticed. It came out a few months ago, I think. It's essentially GTA top-down with a very arcadey, pixelated, classic look to it. And I really enjoyed it. I think it's got a really zany story with a lot of video game references. It's quite a fast-paced story. I don't think the game it does to a degree encourage you to go out and explore, but it's not actually a massively enjoyable world to explore too much, because you're just looking at pixelated buildings and roads and things. It's not like a big 3D open world sort of style game. It's very much 2D. So I mainlined it quite thoroughly, and it's a very, very interesting, like, silly story that you end up doing so many different things in it. It's not just driving about. There's like some platforming and shooting and run and gun and other stuff like that, and it's actually a lot of different games in one, it feels like, actually. So I think there's so much on Switch this year that I don't think it's near the top of the list of stuff you should play, but if you have played through all the great stuff, then this is definitely something that could be a fun sort of 5-6 hour campaign if you just fancy a bit of something interesting on the go. Yeah,
I think it's another thing that's outside your comfort zone as well. So,
yeah, definitely.
It's cool to jump in and try that. Very reference filled, very, very playful, I think. My number 8 is another Castlevania game, but this time in the Metroid vein, with Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. So this is the third GBA game, and I played 2 this year. I played Dawn of Sorrow and Aria of Sorrow. I think Aria of Sorrow pipped it Dawn to the post because Dawn of Sorrow has the really annoying touchscreen stuff that was part of the DS launch era, where you're having to finish off bosses by drawing a symbol on them, and that was just really stupid, and kind of brought it down in my estimation, despite the fact that I actually think the setting for Dawn of Sorrow is more unique, because it's kind of set in the future and there are like cars and stuff, and it's a bit weird. But Aria of Sorrow is just a very solid game. It's probably the culmination of the 3 Castlevania games on GBA, with Circle of the Moon having like a weird difficulty curve, and also having to double tap to run and being just a bit janky, and Harmony of Dissonance just being way too easy and kind of a clone of Symphony of the Night in some ways. Aria of Sorrow stands out on its own. It's got great level design. It is just fun to play. It has a soul system where you collect different enemies' abilities as you go along, and you can use those to your advantage. It has like a mana bar, which makes things more streamlined in terms of using your abilities and sub-abilities, and is just probably the best Castlevania game after Symphony of the Night, if you're looking for that Metroid-style adventure. And I I really want GBA games on the Switch at the moment, because one of my favorite things about the Wii U was playing GBA games on that big screen, and the Switch is just so perfect for it, and I think they would look amazing on that too.
I'm sure we'll definitely know the answer to your question at the end of 2018, hopefully. So
you say that now, but God, Bally.
I think we'll be closer to the reality of what it might be.
Sure, yeah.
Surely there's got to be something. But yeah,
absolutely, we'll be getting there.
My number 7 is Thomas Was Alone on the Wii U.
Nice.
A very unusual puzzle platformer, I would describe it as, with a very strange narrative that gives random blocks character. And not just character, like you feel fairly attached to like a lot of them, and they all have very unique attributes, and you use them differently to get through stages, and they split up and rejoin each other, and there's other interesting twists in the plot, and it's a very well told story, even if I don't think the story ends in any particularly interesting way. I think it's just kind of it's a story that does a lot of character development without actually being a good story in and of itself, perhaps.
Right.
But that said, it's still a very solid 2D platformer, regardless of any plot things. And it's definitely the characters that make it unique. And
I don't think this game would stand out at all if it didn't have that stuff. You know, like the narrative blanket over is why people talk about this game. It's a good puzzle game, but like I just in a world where there are like 5,000 games released on Steam this year alone, it's hard for something like that to stand out on its aesthetic and in its art style. So
definitely one checking out if you're really into the puzzle platformer genre, or you just want a really unusual take on that genre, because it's cool. I had a good time. It was weird.
Made by one man, Mike Bithell, who we mentioned in the previous segment when talking about Subsurface Circular, his new game.
Right, exactly.
My number 7 is No More Heroes 2 Desperate Struggle, which is a game I played this year because of the announcement of No More Heroes 3, which up until this moment, my brain had forgotten that had happened, and that's why I played it. But now I'm like, oh shit, No More Heroes, well, I guess it's not No More Heroes 3 technically, but Travis Strikes Again is coming to Switch maybe next year. So not only do we have like Bayonetta, but we also have No More Heroes. That's a lot of action come into the system, which is cool. This game is here not because I necessarily think it plays that well, but because it's just fucking bonkers crazy. And it just surprised me constantly throughout its like however many bosses you go through. It subverts things all the time. There are times where you're playing as a completely different character. There's these weird hazy dream sequences. There's like differing mechanics constantly that you don't expect, like a giant robot fight in the middle of a town. Like there's just so much weirdness, and like Suda51 oozes out of this game in a way that I don't think he has done in some of his more recent efforts, and I'm really looking forward to him coming back and retaking the series helm and doing something strange on Switch, because this is a series that stands out to me not because I enjoy playing them, but because the just absolute bizarreness strikes me in a way that not much else does, and that's different for me because I usually am so mechanics focused, and I kind of do like the fighting. Like I enjoy the kind of lightsaber combat and the kind of dodging out the way and all that stuff, and I actually played this on a normal controller. I guess it's the Wii Pro controller, right? The Wii Classic Controller Pro. God, these names, tell you, it just gets to me.
That one.
The Wii Classic Controller Pro, as opposed to the Nunchuck and Wii Remote, because just less finicky and it worked. But I'm very interested to see him doing stuff on Switch, and I know that he's going to use the Joy-Cons for motion again, because that's what those games were built on. But I'm very curious, and I think No More Heroes 2 weirdly just came out of nowhere and was like, oh my god, this thing has a lot of problems, because it has a lot of Japanese developers, there's a lot of misogyny and bad stuff about women in their games, a cultural thing for sure, but I don't know, it's hard to give excuses in this day and age, but that's Japan for you, but there is a lot of good stuff in there, and I really did enjoy my time with No More Heroes 2. My number 7.
My number 6 is a game that you lent to me, MBZ. Rainbow Kirby and the Rainbow Curse.
I thought you were about to say Rainbow Six Siege and be like, what the fuck, man?
I just picked it up and thought, why not? Let's do it. Surprise. this is obviously, I guess, the spiritual sequel or the sequel to Canvas Curse. And
it is indeed.
It's not as good as Canvas Curse. It's a lot shorter. It's considerably easier, perhaps, or maybe I'm just a better gamer. I don't know. But God, this game looks good, and it's so enjoyable for as long as it does last. I could certainly have done with a little bit more come the end of this game, but I don't know. There's something still quite appealing about like a little short game you can just play and have a really good time, and it's so consistently good all the way through.
There's a great charm to this game. Like,
really
it's not just the look, but the music of Kirby has always been so great and charming and cheerful.
Right, and
it's very
there's
cool.
some really interestingly designed bosses, and the final boss is very interesting. I thought that was a really a unique take on an idea, essentially. I don't know if they're ever going to return to the idea of the whole stylus create a line.
Yeah, I mean, with the Switch not having a stylus or like the touchscreen being de-emphasized generally, it seems like we may not get another one of these.
And I feel like if they do work a way around it, they'll focus a lot more on a game like perhaps Mario Maker than they will on something like Kirby. And then once you go down that path, you're going back to the DS and sort of Wii U gamepad. So I'm not sure how keen Nintendo will be to ever go back to that sort of thing. But it's for what it was. It's a great game. It's a great platformer, and I had a great time. I think this and Kirby Canvas Curse are my two favorite Kirby games. The handful of other 2D games I've played, like the N64 game and what's the one on GB? I can't remember the name of it. I can't remember either. There are too many weird Kirby named games. That
it was an Ambassador game, though.
Metroidvania-y, and I didn't really enjoy that as much at all. So these two just stand up head and shoulders above the rest. And yeah, I mean, we got more Kirby coming next year. It's always Kirby. Like, it's so consistently got games coming out on Nintendo systems, and some of them are very good, and I need to try more. But this is one of the very best ones for the Wii U, so definitely recommend checking that out.
Kirby really is like the burger bun of Nintendo's franchises. He just fits in anything, and you just put him there, and he's always tasty.
If in doubt, bring out a Kirby game. Like any time with a console life cycle, just get it out. Do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Great. My number 6 is the original Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo. Very good. I'm really surprised that I even like this game whatsoever, because I have never been a fan of its art style. As someone who didn't grow up in the 16-bit era, it's never appealed to me looks-wise. Still looks pretty bad. But I think actually on the Super Nintendo Classic, if you apply the kind of the CRT filter, it actually helps a huge amount.
Add some more Vaseline to that Vaseline, it works out. Yeah,
basically, like it makes it look far less pixely, and it stands out much more nicely on the screen when you do that, when you apply it. But the one thing that is so great about this game is how well it controls. It feels perfect. Like, it feels exactly how you want Donkey Kong to move, and rolling with him and switching between Diddy. The levels are pretty satisfying, but they are very tough, and there is a lot of BS, I think, like in some of the later ones where things kind of jump out of nowhere at you and like, oh, God's sake, which I get annoyed with in like Mario games. But
it's quite zoomed in, like you don't see very far in front of DK. Right,
so they can surprise you, essentially. Yeah. But I think that I just generally like the feel and the mechanics of Donkey Kong more than I like Mario, and I think we both agree on that. So
yeah, we've said that before.
So replaying levels or going back through is not something that I find as a chore in these games. Like, I kind of just enjoy trying to nail those jumps, because a lot of Donkey Kong games are about nailing sequences where you're just doing bounce from thing to thing to thing, and you'll have a lot of momentum behind you. And that is the case with like the Minecart, should I say, levels here. And
it's permeated your brain.
Yeah, I know. God, it's permeated the entire universe, Bally. But there is just a general sense of speed and momentum, and I really enjoyed going through it. It's a very cool game, and I am now more open to maybe playing the other Super Nintendo ones, which I didn't think I would say, but hey, there you go. It kind of came out of nowhere, because I was like, someone in the Discord was like, hey, NBZ, you should play Donkey Kong Country, you need to play it. I'm like, oh, fine, I guess I'll play it. And then, it just came out. I was like, oh my God, this is actually really good. So there you go. Donkey Kong Country made my list. Yeah.
My number 5 is Wario Land Shake Dimension, or Shake It.
Oh, right. I just forgot you played this year.
Yeah.
It's come up a lot recently.
Yeah.
So.
I did play quite a lot this year, actually. So
yeah.
I'm pleased with myself. This is a very, very good 2D platformer. I think it's my favorite Wario Land. I think it's stronger than 4. It's an easier game than 4, but it looks better than 4, and it's just got some nicer level design, I feel. Also, it's not got brutally difficult bosses, although the final boss in this game is very challenging. I said on the show I wasn't a huge fan of most of the Wii remote stuff, although the aiming when you're kind of in a cannon and stuff can be quite interesting. I did enjoy that aspect. I think that other stuff, just like the enemies, the themes of the worlds, are very strong in this game, and as a complete package, it's just got like some really interesting cutscenes and has this perfect cartoon look that it could just be like literally a Saturday morning cartoon. It's perfect. And I don't know where Wario Land's going to go next. Like, I'd love just another game like this on Switch, new levels, bigger, better. Let's do it. Like, it's a really great formula. And this game was from quite a while ago, I want to say.
It's been too long. It's been way too long. We need Wario to come out of his darkness and re-embrace us and steal some more things.
Is this the most recent one?
I think so. Yeah.
It's like 2008?
Right. It's been a long time since a mainline Wario Land game.
Because normally you think about like F-Zero and I guess before Samus Returns came out, Metroid.
But I think it's because Nintendo has so many platforming series that it's often easy to forget something like Wario Land. So... yeah, that's a shame because it is one of the more unique ones in their arsenal. Yeah,
we've said it before. We like Wario and DK the best. They're the best ones. Nintendo.
Yeah, probably
more
overall.
Of them, please.
Yeah, fuck Yoshi and Kirby.
Yeah, Yoshi and Kirby. They just keep coming out all over the shop, but we don't want them. We want DK and Wario.
Yeah, they're the best. So my number 5 is Wolfenstein: The New Order, which is the first Wolfenstein game that you've actually been watching a playthrough of.
I've watched the first 3 episodes of the Let's Play you recommended me. And yeah, me and Caroline are really enjoying it. It's very, very gruesome and dark.
Oh boy. If you think that's bad, just wait till you get to New Colossus. I'll tell you that much.
So yeah, and I do plan on picking up New Colossus next year, assuming I enjoyed the rest of the Let's Play, which I'm enjoying so far. It's just a lot to take in. Yeah, so MBZ.
Yeah, it's cool. I think one of the first things that happens in that game is you make a major choice as to a certain story beat, and that will play out depending on who you choose. And I've not gone back and seen the other stuff, but that carries over into the second game as well if you choose the same person. So it's interesting that they have this kind of branching narrative that is like gives you completely different cutscenes and everything depending on how that goes. And there are not many games that are bold enough to do that. I think The Witcher 2 is one that does it pretty definitively. Witcher 2 is actually kind of crazy in the way it does it because there is so like you go to a completely different town in Witcher 2 depending on one choice you make, and it's like a good 2/3 of the game that's made up of that. So I always like it when game makers do that. But Wolfenstein: The New Order is just such a great fun shooter that play it on easy and just blast your way through Nazis, because you can just the best thing about it is taking 2 guns and dual wielding them, and the shotgun is incredible in this series, and so I'm just rolling around with double shotgun, running down these corridors, taking down Nazis, and it feels amazing. So that stuff is fantastic, but I also think it does quiet moments really well. Like there are some really tense scenes where you're just walking around and looking at environmental stuff and reading documents and kind of getting a sense of the world and what happened and how the Nazis took over and kind of the key players and who the villains are and just great characterization generally, just really well voice acted and motion captured, and there's some just well done relationship stuff in this game. It's just really smartly put together, and I think the second game is miles better than it, but I still think this game is good enough to be number 5 in this list this year. So yeah, I think it was a great stepping stone to what they did next, and just a great fun game that I would recommend people just blast through and enjoy the ride. Great. Wolfenstein: New Order, my number 5.
my number 4 is Advance Wars 2, A Black Hole Rising.
Yeah, there we go.
I had been meaning for a long time to play this game, and I can't believe I waited so long, because it is a fantastic game. It is a jump up in difficulty and scope versus the first Advance Wars. It's definitely a much harder game. There's a lot of BS, to be frank. There's one way of looking at it where there's basically cannons and stuff.
I mean, look, I will openly say that Fire Emblem Conquest has a lot of BS, but I still love it, you know?
Right,
I love that challenge for me in that style of game, and I think it's the same for you when it comes to Advance Wars.
Yeah, it's a much longer experience, it's a much tougher one, and I had a massive Advance Wars itch, and I was just like, right, let's do it. And I still need to play Dual Strike and
Dark Conflict, I think.
Conflict, that's the second one on DS, yeah. So I still need to play both of those. And obviously there's stuff like Tiny Metal coming to Switch and War Groove. So
we're in a renaissance for Advance Wars stuff.
Yeah, so, and who knows, it might be another Advance. I'm less confident of that one with Fire Emblem coming to Switch. But this is a very, very strong Advance Wars game. I would not recommend playing it if you've not played the first. I don't think it's that easy and fun to jump into out of nowhere. But if you enjoyed the first and you want some more, it's bigger and better, and there are just some really great campaign missions that are much longer and tougher, and interesting stuff happens. Like I think the story is zany and cutesy in the same style as the first game, and they introduces more characters that have like some unique powers and stuff like that. I think it's a very important improvement on the first game that I thoroughly enjoyed. But I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, but I did enjoy it a ton.
Great. My number 4 is a game we've been playing a lot of recently, in which you talked about last on the what we've been playing segment. That is Rocket League on Nintendo Switch. And this game has been out for a long time. It's a new release on Switch, but because it came out earlier on other platforms, we do count it as an old game. But I've been having a great time with Rocket League. I think it's been a huge amount of fun. It's something that I didn't expect to really get into. That's why I was very, like, when we asked for the review code, I was like, okay, I'm just going to give this to Bally and not really care about it and maybe wait for a sale. But when it ended up that I got to play it anyway, I was actually kind of thrilled about it, because it is a real unique thing that just feels good to play, you know? Like, there's something about controlling that car and zooming around and boost jumping and flipping through the air, and when you finally make contact with the ball and score a goal, it's just an incredible kind of elation of feeling that game gives you. So yeah, I've really loved it. I think we've just talked about it a lot recently, so it's hard to like say more. But Rocket League is it's a solid game to have in multiplayer rotation. Like, now the Switch has Mario Kart and ARMS and Splatoon, and Rocket League very easily joins the ranks of those. As if Nintendo want me to pay the money for next year for the online account, I think Rocket League will play a big part in me paying that amount, for sure.
Well, you said you don't want to talk more about it, but Rocket League is my number 3, MBZ.
Oh, well, there we go. Let's talk about it more.
It's currently me and Caroline's go-to multiplayer game, and the most time I've spent on this game has been local multiplayer with Caroline, where we play with some bots and just playing opposing teams at both 2-on-2 and 3-on-3s. We are both getting much, much, much better at this game. We're playing with like the computer on the second hardest difficulty now.
Okay.
And really, really enjoying it. Sort of working out some really like fancy shots and shots from angles, and doing the sort of the side flip a lot more than the front flip to get certain angles on things.
Right. Yeah.
And spiking the ball out of the sky and just more aggressive plays essentially. I'm really getting into it. I'm absolutely loving it. I agree with you. It could be a huge factor in paying for some online next year. I know I said I'd go back to some Splatoon 2, but I mean, this is hooking me hugely at the moment. And like the Splatoon 2 update came out and I still haven't gone back to it. It's probably because Xenoblade and Zelda and all this other stuff is happening. It's just absurd. God. So yeah, we just need like a little break in 2018, please, where just something doesn't come out for maybe 2 or 3 months, and then we can catch up on a few things. That'd be greatly
Imagine like us saying that now, having lived through the Wii U era of drought after drought. Like, man, it's crazy. Yeah. Isn't it?
It's so much. But yeah, obviously this game came out in 2015, but it's a fantastic game, and I'm still going to play a ton of hours into it. So
yeah, I think the best thing about Rocket League is that it has a very strong community around it, which means that it's going to be a thing you can have no worries about jumping in and getting matches for. And as I said, I think when we talked about it last time, the best thing about this game is that it has crossplay with the other platforms. And, you know, as much as Sony are being stubborn, well, guess what? Nintendo and Microsoft are reaping the benefit of just having this massive pool of players to draw on. It's just been great. So, good stuff. So that was your number 3 as well. So I guess it's back to me again.
That's number 3. Your number 3.
My number 3 is Severed from Drinkbox Studios. It's a game that I've been meaning to get around to for a very long time because I love the pedigree of that studio. They made Guacamelee. They just announced Guacamelee 2 is coming out, hopefully next year. And they made Mutant Blobs Attack, all of which I have just really loved. They're all so completely different in style and gameplay, but they're all excellent games. And Severed is among, you know, some of the best stuff I've played on Vita. It is an excellent touchscreen-based game that leverages those ideas in a way that is smart and not spammy. It makes you think about every movement you make. It makes you not rush in and has systems in place to force you to not spam slashes here and there. It has a dungeon-crawling kind of first-person nature to it, but it also has a Metroid map so that you don't get lost very easily. Like finding upgrades is cool. There are secrets and hidden things that are very unique and interesting to figure out. And just the whole combat scenario of trying to juggle enemies and the timers on the bottom of the screen and making sure you have one calm down before you focus on the other one that's just about to pop up it's a real intensity, but it feels so good when you have the rhythm going and you're figuring it out and you're getting through and taking enemies down. It's out on Switch, I believe, already. Hopefully next year, Bally, you'll have a window where you can pick it up. But
I'd like to.
It's really awesome, and it just cements Drinkbox as one of my favorite independent developers. They always do something different, and you know, I love that they're doing Guacamelee 2. I'm a little bit disappointed that they're not doing something weird and different, but I'm sure they will do in the future. But yeah, they are excellent developers in Severed. It sits highly on this list for a reason. I loved it. I think it's great.
My number 2 is going right back to the very first game I played this year at your house, MBZ. This is, of course, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons.
Oh my God, I'm surprised this didn't get number 1. Bally, that's crazy.
I mean, it was tough. It was tight between this and my number 1. But I don't want to spoil any of the story of this game, but I just want to talk about how it made me feel. And it made me feel a lot because this game is one of the most perfect 2 to 3 hour gaming experiences I've ever had. It was really nice just to be able to go around to your house and you'd play the game before, so any bits that I was really struggling with, and there were maybe a handful, not too many.
There was one bit that I forgot about that I had struggled with as well, and we had to look it up, but aside from that,
you were able to advise me, and there were a few moments, but the idea of combining narrative with gameplay and linking those two, which games do so uniquely versus any other medium, is just a reason why this game is so strong. And of course, A Way Out is coming out next year, I believe.
Yeah, it is.
It's looking grim for that thing to come to Switch. I don't think that game's gonna make it, but I mean, not to say it's going to be an incredible game. And Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, I know the designer went off on one at the Game Awards. I've forgotten his name.
He did, yeah. Joseph Fares, like, he's a personality for sure.
Yeah.
But he did make what I consider is one of the greatest games ever made. So I kind of like give him license to kind of do what he wants almost. Because I think A Way Out does look incredible as well.
And he was ultimately saying, like, screw films, games are like the ultimate medium. And
I think actually among all game developers, he's one of the most uniquely qualified people to actually say that, because he made a game which is so uniquely narrative through gameplay.
And like, I hope A Way Out, and I presume A Way Out will be very similar in that aspect, and it's looking great. I think the ending of this game is incredible. I don't want to spoil it. If you haven't played this game, you have to. Like, I have every intention to play it with Caroline at some point. I've been very careful to not tell her too much about the story or anything, but she's very keen to play it with me at some point.
No, that sounds great.
who knows? Maybe this game could come to Switch, but we'll see. We'll see.
It is EA after all.
It is EA, and what a game.
Well, I guess EA didn't actually publish Brothers, but they are dealing with a way out.
Yeah. So there's hope, but yeah, I absolutely loved this game, and it was a great way to kick off the year. And actually, looking back, I was in a bit of a gaming funk at that point in time. Like I'd bought a lot of very long games. I'd completed and played very few of them, and I was playing smaller games that weren't really that exciting. And I was like, NBZ, I just need a game that gets me reinvigorated about video games again. And this game was the perfect game for that. And I went on to play some great games this year, as I've discussed many of them. And obviously the Switch was a huge thing in and of itself to spur me on to play more games. But yeah, Brothers,
100%.
What a game. MBZ.
So, from one game that I wanted you to play for freaking forever to another game that you wanted me to play for freaking forever, it's Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, number 2.
Oh, here we go. It gets so many shout-outs.
It does. I don't know if I have anything to say about this game, because we talk about it way too fucking much. No one knows anything about it, MBZ. You might as well give them the details. Yeah, I don't know. I think Tropical Freeze is unique in its blend of creativity with level design. Where you have the moments of a thematic thing about the level being integrated with the mechanic that the level is trying to teach you and get you involved with. It's exceptional at that stuff. Like, I think it is unparalleled when it comes to creativity and level design. And it's just a really great controlling game. Donkey Kong, as I said, with the original Donkey Kong Country, has a certain feel to it. And so you take a platformer that feels this good to play, add in like the bonus characters like Dixie and Cranky, Dixie being the main one who actually makes this game fun, because she gets you out of a lot of tight situations. It's a great thrill ride, and I think it has flaws, and they are rather large from my perspective. Like, the bosses are annoying in their design. And lives is obviously a thing that is frustrating, but all that said, the fact that it's able to, do so much well despite those important flaws, I have to give it so much praise. It's a fantastic platformer, fantastic game. We love it for a reason, I guess. So there you go, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, number 2 on my list for this year.
Earlier in the show, MZ, you talked about Xenoblade and the way that you just played 3.5 hours and you were like, wow, I can't even believe time has moved that much. What is going on? This game did that to me a lot, and I'm ashamed to say I'm only 35 hours in, and I'm only about halfway, I would say, in the amount of time I want to spend with this game. It's a long game, and that game is Stardew Valley. When you played this game last year, and there's a lot of people's game of the year last year for 2016, and rightly so, because I was like, right, well, I've played Harvest Moon, Friends of Mineral Town, and like MBZ, he's not really played that game. He's played other Harvest Moon games, but he's super positive on this. Like, I'm really interested to know how much it steps up that formula and what it does new and all these things. And it just does not everything new, but there's so much new stuff in it and so many more options, and it smooths out a lot of the stuff that Harvest Moon struggles with. And it's such an overall smooth experience. You always want to play one more day. I just want to play one more day. And it literally took Mario Odyssey to stop me playing this game. That's how good it is. And I really want to dive back into it before the end of the year, and maybe even into the start of 2018, because I feel like I've barely scratched the surface of what I can do with this game and like where my farm is going and what I want to achieve, because there's just so many characters I've barely interacted with. And I know there's huge things like the desert that I've not been to yet, and there's loads of different things that you can do, and you can play it for 2 hours at a time, and then each 2 hours do something completely different and still have a really enjoyable experience that contributes to the growth of your farm and ultimately making more money, more gains, more money, more vegetables, more everything. Like, you just want everything in this game.
There's so many layers. It just layers upon layers of complexity.
Exactly. And like, you sunk another 8 hours just like fiddling with your farm for a bit.
I know. I was like, I'll just play like an hour of Stardew to reacclimatize myself to talk about it on the show again. And I just fell down the hole like super hard. I was like, oh shit, like this game, it is a time vampire for sure. If you want a definition of that, that is Stardew Valley.
And it works beautifully on Switch. It runs very well. I know there are a couple of updates that ironed out a few of the
they sped up the load times, I think, and stuff like that.
Yeah, they sped stuff up like that, and it's just the perfect pick up and go game when you're on the go or when you're at home. It still looks great on the big screen. Like it's a hugely like great game to have on Switch. I'm so glad it made it, and I'm glad it made it this year because I know it was in the running for a long time. And obviously there's the multiplayer to come, likely in 2018, I believe. So we can get on that, MBZ, if it's cross-platform. I don't know.
That would be really cool if we had like a combo farm together and just hung out and did that. That would be amazing. I hope they do that. I hope it works out, but we shall see. Anything else to say on Stardew Valley, Bally?
It's going to feature very highly in the next top 50 games of all time. I'm
very good.
Pushing hard.
Yes, hard. You won't have any trouble getting that up the list.
Right, because it jumps all over Harvest Moon, Friends of Mineral Town. Friends of Mineral Town was a great first step, don't get me wrong, but this game is a great
for its time
evolution.
As well. You know, for its time, it did incredibly well.
But taking that concept and going another step further, this game does it perfectly.
Yeah. It pretty much is the perfection of that formula. I'm so glad it came to Switch because I knew this was a game that you would fall in love with.
It's a sort of game that in like 20 years, every 10 years of my life, I'm going to want to restart it from like ground up and just go for something different. You know,
yeah,
it's that
totally.
kind of, and it's a real special game. Really good.
Excellent. Well, my number one will come as no surprise if you have seen me on Twitter this year and just known how much I've played of this game. I played this game more than any other game this year, which in the year of Zelda and Xenoblade 2 and Persona 5.
Which month did you start playing this game?
April, I think, or May.
Right.
And I played it last week as well, so I've been.
Tell me,
consistent.
Like once a week, I play this game every day.
Yeah, which I never do anymore with video games because I'm not like when back in the day with Pokemon, I used to play that one game forever, constantly throughout the year, and I just don't do that anymore because that's the nature of the show. We talked about a lot of stuff, but this game is so fucking good that I can't drag myself away from it, and that game is Overwatch. And if I send this podcast back in time to me in 2016 when Overwatch was coming out, I would have been like, who are you? You're not NBZ. I don't know this person. Because when Overwatch first came out, I looked at it and I was like, oh, this looks really cool. Like the characters are cool. But when I was watching a live stream that Giant Bomb did, I was starting to feel very motion sick when I was watching them. Jeez. And I didn't know what was up, like whether it was that specific thing or what, but I didn't feel the need to jump into Overwatch because I didn't know, whether it was going to be able to be a game that I would play and enjoy or whether I just feel horribly sick the whole time, as I always do with first-person games. And then they had a free weekend for the anniversary. It was the 1-year anniversary of Overwatch back at the start of this year. And I was like, okay, I'll jump in and start playing it. And not only did I not get motion sickness, but around 40 minutes into this game, I had this revelation in my mind where I'm enjoying this game so much that I'm like, I think this is one of the best games I've ever played. I honestly think this is one of the best games that has ever been made. It is so incredible in so many aspects, and it kind of shocked me that this team-based multiplayer shooter with these colorful characters was something that for me personally would be up there in the rankings of my favorite games of all time. And it's crazy that after such little time with the game I could make that statement, but there is something about the world and the feel and the characters and the just unbelievable variety in gameplay styles in Overwatch that makes it an experience that is constantly fresh and interesting to go back to. I could spend 15 hours playing Mercy, which I have done, and enjoy healing and getting my team to work together and help everyone and getting thanks for healing people and doing well and doing all this stuff. And then I switch to someone like McCree, and suddenly I'm a cowboy, shooting people down from a distance and rolling around and stunning them and taking them down with my bullets as fast as possible, to being a roadhog and using a hook to yank someone towards me and just tanking damage and healing myself up when I'm worn down. It is the characters are all so completely different that it feels like you're playing a brand new game every time you pick one up. And there are so many of them.
The difficulty in balancing that must be insane.
Yeah, of course it is. And they're constantly updating it. They're constantly changing it. Like, Mercy got completely changed this year, where she used to be able to resurrect a whole team with her ultimate ability. And now, like, that got nerfed down to where she can only do it as, like, a standard ability to one person at a time. And so her ultimate got changed to, like, this thing where she can fly anywhere through the air and just shoot people, which is a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed doing that. But, like, Overwatch is just a game that is constantly alive. And when I talked about Rocket League earlier, one of the benefits I said was that it's crossplay, and there's a huge community around it. The community around Overwatch is just so incredibly enormous. Like, not only just the fan art and all the stuff that is surrounding it, but like Blizzard leans into it with their mini animations they do, which are just so good. I don't think you've ever watched any of them, Bally. And I'm not sure like they would make as big an impact until you start playing the game. But they are like Pixar level quality, like mini movies that Blizzard put out.
Cool.
They are excellent. And there are so many people playing this game. So many people love it. It's like so cosplayed everywhere. But it is for a reason. It's because the game is exceptional. Like, it is so exceptional to play. It feels fantastic. All the characters are different, and it's always a different experience. They're always adding things. There are like event things and all that stuff. And obviously, loot boxes have had a rough year. We'll say that much. But the stuff they do with cosmetics in Overwatch makes you want to like a loot box, which is not something that people think right now. And yet, they pull that off. Like, I keep playing because I want to get another loot box for leveling up so I can maybe get a cool skin and then like just go around with it with my character, which is so dumb because I always criticized Overwatch for the fact that it's a first person game, so why the hell would you want a skin because you never see yourself. But you know, there are moments when you can see your character, like when you're in the loading area, before you start the match, you can like do emotes and stuff and see your character. There are play of the game things where you see your skin in the like MVP thing. There's a lot of that stuff which leverages the fact that these are characters with designs as opposed to just being a first-person game. And even in the first-person animations, like the little hand movements and gestures, there's a reason people, I think, compare Blizzard to Nintendo in the way that on PC, they are basically the Nintendo of that space, where their games are so incredibly polished and well-designed and well thought out and are always gameplay first. But also, Blizzard has a great knack for storytelling and world design that Nintendo just doesn't. And so I think that they leverage that strength incredibly with the cast they have and just everything they do around this game. It's phenomenal. I will keep playing it into next year, and I'll keep playing it forever and ever. I love this game. It's incredible. Overwatch, my number one, without a question, without a shadow of a doubt. So there you go. Do you want to count down your top 10, and I'll do mine again one more
Sure.
time?
So my top 10 are number 10, F-Zero, number 9, Swords and Soldiers 2, number 8, Retro City Rampage DX, number 7, Thomas Was Alone, number 6, Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, number 5, Warrior Land Shake It, number 4, Advance Wars 2, Black Hole Rising, number 3, Rocket League, number 2, Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, number 1, Stardew Valley.
Great list. And mine is number 10, Star Fox on the Super Nintendo, number 9, Super Castlevania 4, number 8, Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, number 7, No More Heroes 2, number 6, Donkey Kong Country, number 5, Wolfenstein The New Order, number 4, Rocket League, number 3, Severed, number 2, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, and number 1, Overwatch.
A couple of DK games there, very good.
Yeah, I know, somehow. Donkey Kong's wormed his way into my heart. All your fault, basically. But there we go. It did happen in the end. So yeah, it was an okay year, I think, for old games that we played in 2017.
It was surprisingly good considering the Switch launch.
Yeah,
and the
pretty
games
much
that came out this year.
The avalanche of games, we should say. And I mean, like, it impacted your list quite a bit because Rocket League and Stardew are like old games, but they were also new games because they came out on Switch this year.
Right, and then I spent at least like 50 hours on just those games.
Exactly,
alone, so.
yeah, exactly. So So yeah, I think that's where we wrap things up for this episode. Before we go, though, we have a few things to talk about because it's the end of the year and there's a lot of things to discuss. First things first, our Patreon is doing very well. So thank you everyone for supporting us. We are now over our second goal, which means our second Patreon exclusive podcast will be going up in January. We're going to be talking about Star Wars and our childhood experiences with Star Wars. It's going to be a fun talk, especially after The Last Jedi comes out, which we are both losing our minds overseeing very soon.
And we've also just done our first Patreon episode of TNL Ranks, which we talked about our top 5 2D platformers of all time. If
you're starved for content about people liking Tropical Freeze, let me tell you, you should probably subscribe to our Patreon so you can hear more of that.
Yeah, I mean, for $2 a month, you get to listen to me wax lyrical about that game. What more could you want?
Absolutely. So yeah, if you're a $2 patron, you have access to that. So if you would like to support us, you'll get access to a bunch of these podcasts, and eventually down the line, you'll get access to a lot of podcasts. So that's cool stuff.
And we must, of course, give shout outs to our $10 tier supporters.
Indeed, Bally, please do that.
Which, of course, are TNL ambassadors, I should say. So our first ambassador is Alex C. We'll check with you next time if you want your surname read out, just to make sure. And of course, our other TNL ambassador is my girlfriend, Caroline.
Very nice.
Thank you very much for supporting us on the $10 tier. And Caroline wanted a quick word. She wanted to submit a very late entry of her top 5 games of the year that didn't actually come out this year.
Great. I want to hear this
Right,
list.
Here we go. Number 5, Mario Kart 8. We have played a ton of that.
Oh, really? Only number 5? I thought Mario Kart would be higher than that.
We have played a ton of that game this year. Number 4, Rocket League.
Oh, nice.
Number 3, higher than
Mario Kart.
Zelda, Link Between Worlds.
Okay,
She played that right at the start this year. Number 2, Harvest Moon DS.
Oh, man.
I played a bit of that back in the day, but it glitched out on me. And then her number 1 is The Sims 3.
Nice. Yeah. Does she have that on her laptop then?
Yes, she does.
Oh, excellent.
She's a big fan of that. But yeah, thank you to all our patrons, not just our TNL ambassadors. And yeah, if you want to support us on Patreon, we are on, it's linked to our Twitter, or just look for This Nintendo Life on Patreon and you'll find us. We are really appreciative of your support. Help us get to our next goal. We love it.
Absolutely. That's been a great thing to see grow. So thank you everyone who jumped on board since last time. And hopefully we'll keep going with that. And getting close to our third goal now. So if you'd like to support us, please go ahead. That would be very much appreciated. So let's plug other things and get out of here. We're still doing our Final Fantasy VI Backlog Club. We'll be doing that probably start of February, end of January next year.
More details to come.
So keep playing that. I know I'll be starting it in the new year, so I'm looking forward to that. We also have another Game of the Year podcast coming up next time. So if you would like to submit a list for your 2017 Game of the Years, you can send that to our email address, which is Bally.
ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. Please send in your games of the year for 2017. We want to hear them.
Yes, we have a few already because people submitted those along with their old lists, but we would like to have some more, have a big conversation about all the best games. And you can also submit that to our Discord channel, which you can find on our Twitter. Our Twitter is @TNL Podcast. You can find that on the internet. You can also find me on the internet. I'm @LordNBZ. What about you, Bally?
I'm @Ballyman91, BALLYMAN91 on Twitter. Definitely give me a follow. I tweet loads of great stuff.
Yes, very self-aggrandizing. Thank you, everyone, for listening. You can find us on iTunes. We're on Stitcher. We're on every good podcast catcher. Well, that name just really gets me now, Bally. Yes. So you can find us there. It's easy to download. And also, I should probably make a note that if you do subscribe to the Patreon, you get a link to an RSS feed, which will basically give your patron podcast directly to whatever podcast app you use. I use Pocket Casts, and I've tested it out, and it works perfectly. I have the Patreon podcast in my normal podcast feed, which is fantastic. So if you're worried that you have to sit at a computer to listen to it or use the YouTube video, don't worry about that. If you want to get the Patreon podcast, you can get them through an RSS feed directly from Patreon themselves. So that's a great implementation. Thank them for that.
Let us know if you have any issues with that on an email or Discord server. We'll
absolutely
help you out.
Yeah, we will do that. So there we go. Thank you, Bally, for joining me for this first Game of the Year podcast. Looking forward to the next one.
Oh, it's going to be a good one.
And if you want to hear some arguing, that will happen, or maybe some agreement. I don't know. We'll see where it lands. But that will be next time on This Nintendo Life. So thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you another 2 weeks' time, on Christmas Day, in fact, for the final episode of the year. So join us then. Hope you all have good holidays, and goodbye. The musical interludes used on today's show were Indoline Praetorium Day and Where We Used to Be from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, copyright Monolith Soft Nintendo 2017.